Good morning and welcome to the pre-agenda interview for Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. Today we have two appointments to the Commission for Human Relations. We have Kyle Webster and Mary Jane McCullough. If you would like to come to the table, and then we'll have our Deputy Clerk please read the title of the bill.
Bill 2024-0117, resolution appointing Kyle Webster as a commissioner on the Commission on Human Relations for a 4-year term, which will expire February 28th, 2028. And Bill 2024-0118, resolution appointing Mary Jane McCullough as a commissioner on the Commission for Human Relations for a 4-year term, which will expire on February 28th, 2028.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for coming today and for volunteering to participate and sit on this commission. I guess I'll give each of you a chance just to kind of introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your past experience that lends to the work on the commission, and then we're also joined by Councilman Mosley. And then we'll ask some questions, and that's it. Okay? Okay, go ahead.
All right, great. My name is Kyle Webster. I am the Vice President of Housing and General Counsel at Action Housing currently. Action Housing is the largest and oldest affordable housing nonprofit in the region. We build a substantial number of affordable housing units. We are involved in a large number of housing programs, as well as we own and manage about 1,500 units of affordable housing. And as I often say, there's very few things in Allegheny County related to housing that we do not have some level of involvement in. As the counsel for Action Housing in-house, I handle a wide range of housing-based issues. And while I really shy away from any use of the terminology tenant advocate, because I am a landlord and a developer, I am someone who believes very firmly in tenants' rights, and I believe that the best way to do affordable housing and the best way to ensure housing access is by ensuring that landlords and developers are working collaboratively with tenants and understand the laws and needs of these the laws that protect these populations and the needs these populations have. And obviously fair housing is a very key component of that, and I am someone who has worked with the commission for several years in this capacity, and I also work with the Fair Housing Partnership and work quite extensively. I've presented at multiple programs put on by the commission, and believe very, very strongly in their mission and the important role that they play here in the city of Pittsburgh.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Jane McCullough. I am the founder and director of the Language Access Advocacy Organization, Global Wordsmiths. We do translation, interpretation services in multiple languages, and we also advocate for and advance language accessibility. I personally was a Spanish interpreter for about 15 years prior to founding my organization in order to help individuals in the city of Pittsburgh and the region who don't communicate in English be able to access services, resources, and information in an equitable way. I also teach as an adjunct applied translation and translation technologies at Carnegie Mellon University, and I sit on the board of directors of the Alliance for Refugee Youth Support and Education. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, very excited to be here today, and I'd like to recognize my daughters, April and Maggie, who are here learning about public service with me. So thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, well, I'll hand it to Councilman Mosley. If you have questions, yeah. And this is just sort of conversational. We'll just do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, my first question for both appointees is, could you just speak about how you feel, your professional experience, your background, uniquely qualifies you for the role, and what, you want to bring from, your professional experience to enhance the work of the commission?
Sure, yeah, I can lead with this. I think, language access is a civil right. It's protected under Title VI, Executive Order 13166. There are provisions in many federal laws that cover language accessibility, and my professional career has been all about kind of building a culture where more people know about that And I think that when I first started doing this, 20 years ago, there really weren't any supports in place at all. And at that time, I would sort of yell at people and say, like, you have to have interpreters. But what I came to realize is that, most people just didn't know that they were supposed to be doing this work. And so I think teaching people, sharing information, and giving people tools is really important to me. And I think that being part of this commission would allow me to do that in a more official capacity. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think, I've devoted my career at this point to housing, and I think that for a organization like the Commission to be successful, there needs to be subject matter experts at the table who understand the nuances and in and outs of the industry and also of the laws that impact that industry, because it's not just fair housing, it's not just the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's a hodgepodge of laws at the federal, state, and local levels that really impact what it means to truly provide equitable access to housing and equitable ability to stay sustainably in housing. And I do believe that I am somewhat of a subject matter expert. That feels a little bit cocky to say, but I think it's fair, when it comes to housing. And I know that a large bulk of the complaints that the Commission sees is in the housing realm. Housing is where we see, unfortunately, a lot of discrimination. So I believe that I bring an expertise in not just the laws, but also how those laws are implemented in real time and what landlords can and should be doing to abide by those laws. The most common thing I think we see in the housing realm is reasonable accommodation requests, and the interpretation of the word reasonable is something that lawyers have debated for years and will debate for years, but I believe that given my experience in the housing realm, I have a fairly strong concept of what is reasonable, and that interpretation is a little bit further over than what many landlords would admit to, and I think that it's important to have that perspective at the table to ensure that we are truly keeping our landlords and our developers accountable to access to housing. Yeah.
Thank you. I had one other round of questions, and I'll defer back to Madam Chair. My second question for both appointees is there any particular area, specifically that, you would like to really address, to make the Human Relations Commission, more impactful, for Pittsburghers across the city?
Yeah, I mean, definitely language access. Subject matter expertise is, I think, needed in commissions and in public service, because I think so much of the disconnect between service delivery, that is equitable through language assistance is because more people don't have the information they need. So definitely bringing that perspective, I think, is really important because we have a lot of resources and sort of more tools than ever to be able to do this work. It's just a matter of kind of fitting them all together and having somebody who knows where the pieces all go. And I do believe that I bring that to the table. I'm also an autistic person, and I think that my approach to accessibility is, sort of informed through my lived experiences. And, it's not just about language access. I think also, speaking up about neurodivergence and normalizing it, providing representation, for my children and for other people who might be watching this or who might, be afraid to ask for what they need is important. So I think these two areas for me are the most sort of vital from my perspective and my professional experience, but just being part of an organization that fights for equity is, kind of the greater cause for me as well.
And before we go, Kyle, I did have just a quick follow-up, kind of a light bulb went off. Could you just speak a little bit, about the increase in need, for, providing services and just as a city, thinking about the fact that, at least, from my point of view, as a layperson, obviously our city is evolving and diversifying, and there's many more, folks in the city, that aren't, like English isn't their, initial language. Could you just talk about how much has the city transformed in maybe the last 10, 15 years that have increased the need for us as a city to be thinking about folks who, maybe speak English as a second language or even a third language?
Yeah, I love this question because the city has changed a lot demographically, and we're seeing so much growth in our population coming from immigrant and refugee populations. And the last actual study that was done, I believe, was by Migration Policy Institute that tracked the growth rate of what they call limited English proficient individuals over a 10-year period ending in 2013. And at that time, we showed that the rate of growth for this demographic was about 80%. But we know that this is a very difficult to count population, largely because of language accessibility issues. And the real number is thought to be much higher. And that was, a long time ago. And I think the needs of the people in Pittsburgh who don't communicate in English have stayed the same, but their numbers have grown. But then there's also sort of the secondary issue where, Pittsburgh is still very sort of neighborhoody, and somebody from Swiss Elm Park doesn't necessarily see the Spanish-speaking population in Beachview, or the budding Uzbek population, or the refugees who are being resettled here. So there's a matter of numbers, which are hard to track, but very obviously growing. If you're looking at usage statistics for translation and interpretation services, if you're looking at schools and enrollment of ELL families and things like that. But then there's this sort of other side of it where it doesn't always seem to be the case because our neighborhoods are so sort of segregated still, and also because of language access. Specifically, people aren't reaching out for services. They're not very visible populations. So I think anyone who's providing services and interacting with the public can very obviously see the need. Because it's a very difficult to count population, there's not great data for it, but there are a lot of awesome organizations who are starting to track and count that, including our own. And then if you're sort of, like you said, a layperson, I think there's a lot to learn about Pittsburgh. I believe last time I checked, there were more than 50 languages spoken at Pittsburgh Public Schools. And it's an incredibly vibrant and diverse place. We just don't see it. And my hope is that through language access, we can change that.
Thank you. And Kyle, could you just talk about some of the issues specifically you would like to tackle as a member of the commission?
Absolutely. First, I just want to comment real quickly that Action actually has learned a lot over the last few years about language access, and it's actually through Global Wordsmiths, our company, that we've had the privilege of learning that and being really had our hand held on what it looks like to ensure equity in that realm. So that is really important. And also, I've never met her until this process, but our two companies have had the privilege of working together and us really learning from them over the past few years, which has been great. So I would say one of the things that makes Pittsburgh unique as it relates to housing is we are a major urban area where the majority of landlords are ma and pa. They are small. That's right. And this may make me a little ignorant, but for that reason, I actually believe that a majority of the legal missteps around fair housing and equity is a lack of knowledge, because a small landlord doesn't have access to lawyers generally. They don't have access to mandates, that larger landlords sometimes have around fair housing training. They don't have as much exposure, and often they are, definitely making some, at times, egregious missteps, but it's from a place of ignorance, not a place of necessarily hate. And I think that that's also an opportunity. I would love to see us proactively engage with that population before a charge is filed against them, to better educate them in what these laws are, in what these responsibilities are, and the why. Why does it make sense to be a good landlord? Why does it make sense to not discriminate? Why does it make sense to truly discern what reasonable means when it comes to reasonable accommodations, to make sure that you are trying to make your housing as equitable and accessible to the citizens of Pittsburgh? And that's an area of opportunity. I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've generated one of the largest databases of small landlords that we've ever had, which gives us access to that. That's due to the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and other such programs. So we now have access to some names and contact information that we've never had before. And I would really love to see us step that up. I'm a big fan of a landlord registry. Obviously, that is a bigger conversation that has already been taken on by this council, but that's an area that I would definitely love to dive into more and see if I can work with the commission to do a lot of work to better that space.
Thank you. I defer back to Madam Chair.
Yeah, so, thanks. So I do, this is sort of the perfect union for this one question. So I actually I'm learning a lot about this now as a relatively new council member. And I have a constituent, a family, you know, English is not their first language. They have been living for nearly 10 years in a house. I mean, the condition of this house is deplorable, deplorable. And this is a corporate landlord. This is a big landlord with lots of units around the city. Now their situation is that, you know, they're being evicted so that the landlord can fix the house, but they've been paying rent. The whole thing is just so, it's unconscionable. So, you know, I'm always looking for good ideas for legislation, or what can we be doing as a city to stop this type of thing from happening. Obviously the registry is one thing, but even with that, right, like, I mean, the state of this house is, I mean, it would be a vacant property in any normal circumstance, right? So I don't know if you have thoughts, I mean, not necessarily about that case, but just in general, like, what can we do as a city to combat this? Because there's the courts, we're sort of at the mercy of the courts, which is the county, not the city.
Yeah.
I'm sure we both have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, please.
And
Yeah.
this is also, I mean, this, you know, Action Housing has the privilege of playing a major role in the housing stabilization kind of ecosystem of Allegheny County. We are the ones that run, alongside our friends at Rental PGH, we run the Housing Stabilization Center in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh. We also oversee a large percentage of ASK, which is the current rental assistance and housing stabilization program. It stands for Allegheny Housing Stabilization Collaborative. You know, this is a constant struggle of what does it mean to be stable in your housing? We don't want a person to be evicted, but also we don't want a person living in deplorable conditions. And there's that balance of what it means to keep them housed, but also keep them housed stably in a place that's actually sustainable. And our housing stock, unfortunately, in Allegheny County is not as great as it would ideally be. You know, we do have a very old housing stock. We have a lot of housing that, to your point, in most other U.S. cities would be condemned and would not be inhabited. But in Allegheny County, in the city of Pittsburgh, they often are. And there's just not the resources, you know, even for larger landlords, they may not have the funding for that individual house. There's a couple things that could happen. And I'm doing the awkward thing of putting some stuff on Action Housing because we are the ones that implement a lot of these programs. Whole home repairs is an incredible initiative by the state that our now county executive took the reins on. At the state level, Allegheny County, I believe, is running the best program. We made the tough decision not to run a landlord component because we felt that the need was too important on the single family owner occupied side, which means that there's not a lot of resources available to landlords who may not have the funding to upgrade their housing. And, you know, if they do upgrade their housing, who then is the tenant? It's, you know, if they're making that investment, they want a return on that investment. So you may be actually displacing the family regardless if you are not able to somehow help subsidize that rehab. I would love to continue exploring what a multifamily or landlord whole home repairs component looks like. It's something that we're very interested in. I know it's something that the mayor and the county executive have expressed interest in, but I believe it needs its own designated funding source, and I believe that it needs to be a similar but separate program, and that would provide the funding necessary for landlords like this, where you could work alongside PLI or the health department or whatever implementation agency is reviewing the issues with the house to be able to do the necessary upgrades to make it habitable. That's one idea. I have a lot of other ideas. I would love to dive in depth with you, but that would be like a 3-hour meeting, or at least a 1-hour meeting, not necessarily this venue. But this is something that we are constantly struggling with and constantly trying to figure out the best approach to make better. And we want to make better because we see issue with the housing. We see issue with what the landlord is doing in this particular situation. It is not unique to this landlord. I could guess what landlord you're talking about, but I will tell you many, many landlords have that exact same scenario going on. And I think that there are things we could be better doing on the front end to assist the landlord, but also to better assist the tenant. We've also been talking about a robust rehousing program that's also challenging, but is something that, you know, we've been exploring with the Department of Human Services and would love to continue talking about as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, same. I could sit with you all for hours and we could think about a lot of solutions. But for me, what it comes down to is that, you need communication to do everything, right? And the level of inequity that exists when there's no ability to communicate your needs or to report unsafe conditions or to complain to somebody that, you're being treated unfairly, in this scenario by a landlord, but in a great many other scenarios also. I don't think we would tolerate that level of inequity in any other corner of our culture, but with language access, it exists because people really aren't aware of how difficult it is for people to integrate and thrive because, it's not just about, one instance of a window being broken and not being able to report that to somebody. It's a lot of little cuts, right? And it's a lot of, understanding your lease, getting a lease, being able to communicate, deteriorating conditions to somebody who will listen, knowing who will listen. All of this information is in English, right? And it's not provided, in language by most landlords. And there aren't really supports in place that are specific to many situations, housing being one of them, that make people feel sort of safe reporting these conditions. So I guess the analogy I could use here would be like showing up at the ER rather than getting, prenatal health care or something like that, where by the time you get to the ER, the problem's really bad. But, why weren't you able to get to the doctor before, right? Was it transportation? Was it not being able to take the time off work? Was it, for any number of reasons? But when each of those is also sort of loaded with not being able to communicate, people literally do not have a voice. And until that changes, unfortunately, the situation that you described happens all over the city, all the time, to lots of families. And that's something that needs to change through structured policies that enable people to make complaints, that enable people to report these conditions. But if they don't know that mechanism for reporting exists, it won't be used. So I think it's kind of multifaceted, and a lot of communication has to happen, and relationship repair in general, where we talk to people and say, you can make a report here and it's going to be safe and it's okay. And just sort of start where you are and go from there. But yeah, there's so many complexities and so many different things that you could do in terms of language access. But one of the big sort of exercises I do when I do trainings with people is to say, hey, think about a situation where you would need language, to utilize it or to do it. And it's everything, right? It's going to the store, going to the bank, getting an apartment, basic services. And then I ask people to sort of think of a time in their own lives when they couldn't communicate or they didn't have a voice. And I ask, how did that make you feel, right? And people will say things like ashamed, stupid, like I didn't belong, like nobody could hear me, frustrated, right? And it's all these really complex emotions. And if you think about the fact that people have to navigate a lot of those emotions every time they try to do anything that requires language, right? They're not going to keep trying. They're going to shut down. And so I think a lot of the times people in that situation are shut down and they don't know what to do or who to say it to. And a lot of it falls to the grassroots nonprofits and organizations in the city that help, but they only have so many resources. And so, putting policies in place that make people feel safe and give them the opportunity to communicate, I think is the place to start. I could say a lot more, but I'll stop.
Yeah. So, and then I have I'm glad you brought up the mom and pop landlords. This is something I sort of talk a lot about. So affordable housing for many years has segregated our city, right? Like it's been in certain neighborhoods and not in others. And my feeling is that one of the core reasons for that is that we are not maximizing on our voucher program, because we do have all of these mom and pop landlords all over the city. And, it feels like we're to a certain degree, sort of at the mercy of the housing authority and their ability to, you know, run that voucher program. But I don't like to always just say, well, that's not our problem. You know what I mean? So do you have any thoughts about how we can, I mean, and I love this idea of a small landlord database. Like, how can we better engage all these small landlords? Because, I mean, the voucher program, if anyone who's a small landlord knows, the hardest part about it is collecting rent, right? That's the hardest part of the job. And so to have a tenant who is regularly paying rent and, you know, i.e. through the voucher, even if it's only a portion and then you have to only kind of, you know, that's a big win for any landlord. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do. I would love to talk to you more in depth about that. I would say outside of the setting, but I do have a lot of thoughts. We actually,
I mean, more so about what the city could do, right? Like the city's, you know, what could we do to kind of...
Absolutely. I mean, one thing again I will reiterate is right now we have small landlord data in a way that we never have before because of ERAP. And that data is owned in part by the city of Pittsburgh. It's owned by Allegheny County DHS, the city of Pittsburgh, and Action Housing. So we have access to a database. It's not perfect. It's not 100%, but you know, 10,000 landlords received funding from ERAP. That is a large number, and we've never seen that before because we've never had a program that gave out $130 million in rental assistance before to landlords. So that's something I think we can definitely capitalize off of because we actually have access in a way that we haven't before. I do think that there's some incentive-based Section 8 programs that I would love to talk to the city about because I think it would be important for the city to be a partner in them. I don't want to get into too many details because I don't want to make any weird promises or anything in a public setting, but I do think there's some stuff that we've begun exploring, especially around some of our IRA applications that Action's involved in, that do involve large portions, if not the entirety of the city, that I think could do some infrastructure upgrades while simultaneously incentivizing the acceptance of Section 8 vouchers. The other thing I would also say, and this is a big part of Action's mission, is Action believes in building affordable housing throughout the region. We do not believe in segregating the affordable housing we build. That's why we will simultaneously work on a large-scale project in Squirrel Hill and the Hill District. You know, we will work on something in Homewood and in McKeesport and also, you know, in Lawrenceville, et cetera. Historically, there has been a lot of real segregation within how affordable housing is supported and funded, and where, you know, we've even seen administrations in the city of Pittsburgh look to see who is the for-profit developer we could have here first, and if not, then we can defer to affordable housing and nonprofits. I think that there's been a really exciting shift in that in city council and the mayor's office, obviously, over the last several years. That's something that's a bit older, but it is still a reality that often happens of challenging ourselves to, you know, if the city owns really prime real estate, what do we do to recognize that, sure, the city may not get as much money from an Action Housing or a comparable nonprofit, but what impact will that have on the city long term? Just because you can get top dollar from a for-profit market rate developer doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do. And again, I'm happy to get into that more in detail. I will say one of the most recent allocations by the URA is one that obviously I'm a fan of, which is 200 Ross. They selected Action Housing as the developer for that. I think I'm obviously biased towards Action. There are other developers like us that I think the city could be partnering with, but I have seen projects in key neighborhoods that the city owned where the city has gone with the higher paying for-profit developer that is going to focus on market rate because the city wanted to maximize the money they could get. And I'm hopeful that we continue down the path of what it looks like to really value these assets that the city has throughout the city, including in some key neighborhoods, to prioritize the development of affordable housing.
So that actually sort of brings up another question that I know folks are talking a lot about, and that is, you know, in that effort to diversify the affordable housing and put it in neighborhoods like Squirrel Hill, as well as, you know, what we're seeing, and I know that there are perhaps some state level rules with the tax credits and such, but one of the issues is that, and Flats on Ford, which is a beautiful building, you know, is an example of that. Is, you know, you have affordable housing right down the street from Alderdice High School, but it's not the type of housing that you can have 2 or 3 kids. You know what I mean? A family with 2 or 3 kids. It's just not built for that. So I'd be interested in thoughts around too, is how do we get more of that because it's not as you don't make as much money building, multi-bedroom units, 2-3 bedroom units as you do. I mean, if you're a for-profit developer. So what do we do what can we do to get more of the family housing, which is really what we really, really need
Absolutely. I mean, and I apologize. I'm not.
No, yeah, please.
I mean, the best thing to do is, at this point, there is not a single action housing project being built in the city of Pittsburgh that doesn't have city of Pittsburgh money touching it. We know how much it costs to do what you're asking. It is more expensive, and Action's not looking to make a profit. Flats 1-4 is not.
Sure, of course.
As beautiful as it is not a cost-generating structure.
Yeah.
But it is. We want to do what the neighborhood needs. We want to do what the community needs. But there are different realities based upon funding. We can have a conversation of what does it look like to build what you're asking, and what can the city and the URA put up to ensure that we can get there, and then you can also mandate those things so long as the pro forma is realistic in what we're building. So I mean, I think that that's the conversation to be had. And I would tell you, I'm good friends with many people who work very much in this space, who advocate for exactly what you're talking about. Megan Hammond at the Fair Housing Partnership is a huge advocate for this and has been really working with what it looks like to encourage, incentivize, if not mandate, organizations like ours and others to achieve what you're asking for. And I think that that's a realistic thing to strive for. Again, there just needs to be a realistic conversation about what that means financially, and a bit of a negotiation to see what different government funders are able to put up to make that a reality.
Yeah, and then I'll say again too, I feel like the voucher program, that is really the missing piece, because of course so much of the time with our mom and pop landlords around Pittsburgh, they have houses, right? They have single family homes, so. I don't think do you have any other follow-ups?
Yeah, I just had a couple more questions. Specifically in the district that I represent, District 9, there's a lot of anxiety about the impending transformations coming. There's a lot of interest, in kind of continuing the development that happened in East Liberty and seeing that kind of cross East Liberty Boulevard into Larimer, Lincoln, Leamington. And Homewood, and I know, the state constitution, has some limits, and there's certain things that we can't do in Pennsylvania that folks can do, in other states. And I'm speaking specifically around like protecting, renters, particularly, from, displacement primarily caused, by, rapidly increasing, housing costs. We see, in places like Homewood now, apartments are beginning to go for $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month. Is there any, kind of best practices you see around the country that would be legal to do, in the state of Pennsylvania, that could be, codified at the local level, around, protecting, renters, from displacement and allowing, folks to benefit, from this transformation? That's something, I'm really passionate about is, I want, folks that live in the Homewoods and the Lincoln Leamingtons and the Larimers and those other, East End communities to benefit from that transformation. I don't want them to be pushed out, but I want them to be there, benefit, and being that they've, given so much, to hold these communities together, as this development comes in over the next 5-10 years. How do we, protect them, allow them to stay, in the community while we also transform it in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, as an attorney, I think I have a reputation of being a very risk-comfortable attorney in a way that most attorneys in my space are not. So I often find it frustrating when we don't pursue policy initiatives because an attorney says that they believe it's unconstitutional. Let the attorneys fight through that, and also let the public statement of that fight drive the state legislature. That is something I feel firmly about. I've heard tales in the past of bills that were not moved forward because it was deemed that they were likely unconstitutional, that I feel very strongly I could make one hell of a constitutional argument for.
Sure.
So I think that, first of all, let's not allow conservative lawyers drive policy decisions, because we are in a position where there is a crisis going on, and a crisis demands boldness. And there are attorneys that will say we can't do this. There are also attorneys who will say that we can. Hi, I'm one of them. And I'm happy to have those conversations. I do think other things, the city should not take for granted the power that it does have, which again, you all do own a lot of properties in the communities you just said. Deed restrictions are real, they are powerful, they are legal, and that's something you should consider. There's a lot of public money in a lot of these projects, even market rate ones. We have a project that we're building in Homewood right now that we're partnering with OBB on that is not technically an affordable housing project, but it's a community revitalization project. And because of the public money that's in that project, even though it's going to be technically market rate, there are encumbrances that prevent us from doing certain things at that project. That's the Givner building. And there's other projects like that I think you see other developers coming in and doing that you can definitely put those sort of stipulations on. Additionally, as we look to the future, tax incentive programs, LRTAs are really, really popular. There can be strings on LRTAs, and that would be completely within the legal bounds, and that's something to explore. So again, bigger conversation. We're getting into the nitty gritty of a lot of what I think about on a daily basis, and a lot of what I work on a daily basis, and I'm happy to explore it. And I think it's really exciting that we have a city council who is really passionate about this. When I first started this work, I have the privilege of living, no offense to you all, living in Deb Gross's district. She has been my councilwoman during her entire term in office. And I will say, when I first started doing this work 10 so years ago, I was told, we'll talk to Deb. She's the one who handles affordable housing. We now have a city council that is excited about affordable housing, and that's exciting to me. And I would love to partner with you all and talk a bit more about what those possibilities are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Mary Jo, I did have a question for you about things we could, do as a city, kind of following up on our conversation earlier with taking into account how the city is changing, how there is, many more non-primary English speakers in the city. Is there things, from a policy standpoint, or even just from a governance standpoint, that we could do as a city to make the city more welcoming and really understand the fact that, from today moving forward, the city's going to continue to move, toward this diversification and not just, primarily English speakers are going to be in the city. We're going to, look much more like, many of the other cities in the Northeast have maybe looked for the last generation or so. Like, what are some things that we can do from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, Pittsburgh is actually doing a lot. We can always do more. I believe we last updated our language access plan in 2018. But the city will be going through renewing its welcoming status, I believe, sometime this year and next year. And probably another update to that plan will have to happen at that point. And we do have great policies, great people, and a lot of passionate language access advocates already within government. However, I think incentivizing more people to get on board to help advance those policies and those procedures is really important. Getting buy-in, if you will, because most people don't get language access or sort of understand, the mandates, what to do, even how to work with interpreters. And I think it's really uncomfortable for people, and so they're less likely to engage with it. So I think we have policies, we have plans, we have a lot of resources, but people aren't always using them. So I believe training is really important to teach people, what language access is, why it's so important, and then how to do it, right? How to work with interpreters, where to sit, who to make eye contact with. And that gives people power and tools, which make them more likely to engage with this work. And then they'll start reporting data back, right? So we can actually track this population, and then we can manage that data and synthesize it and make decisions based on where we know people are having needs. I also think repairing relationships with non-English communities is really important because, it's no individual's fault, but there's such a rift there that there are trust issues. Of course, people coming from different parts of the world have different relationships with government, but that's a hard problem to solve, and getting more people involved and engaged from the communities, where this is a bigger issue is really important, and not putting the onus on them, but making sure they have representation is sort of something that I think is really important, because a lot of the times in language access plans, there will be provisions for community partnership, community voices, but sometimes that's just extracting information from people, and that, puts a burden on communities. So how do we actually help and, get people to lead by giving them resources rather than extracting is kind of something I'm really passionate about. But also giving more city employees information and tools. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, because if you have a policy that requires, 8 different directors to, report back their data for usage, and to make language requests through a centralized repository, for example, but none of them know how to do it or want to or really think about it, then you're just going to get stalled, where a lot of cities find themselves. So to be clear, a lot of great people here are doing a lot of great things. We just need a lot more of the great people here to do a lot more great things. And I think continuing to push and raise awareness and create concrete policies, and then not just force people to comply with them, but actually get people excited about doing this work is sort of an approach I think is really important. And a lot of that is sort of not going in and saying, you're doing something wrong, or, you're bad if you haven't done this yet, but saying this is new for a lot of us. So how can we all do this work together, and how can we better serve this population with the resources we have? What are those resources, and how do they work?
I just had one final follow-up for Mary Jane. Are there any cities around the country that are really good at doing this that we could look to as a model to emulate?
Yeah, I think if you, really language access is having a huge sort of moment right now all over the country, and a lot of cities are doing a lot of great things, but immediately to mind comes Washington, D.C., and also New York City in some ways, because they've been doing it for a lot longer, right? So they have the experience and the wisdom and the trial and error and a lot of concrete policies. And I know DC's program in particular has been really successful over time, and it's one to look toward. However, last year, all of the different federal components were required to update their language access plans. And so there are more resources than ever kind of to look to within other governments and other agencies and other cities and other states to see different approaches, not just the best approaches, right? Because, there's a lot of narrative focused around this sort of Title VI enforcement, language access planning, and implementation, but that's not the only narrative, right? And what works in DC might not work in a city like Pittsburgh, right? But what works in Pittsburgh might be something new, and we have to sort of discover that together and take action to make sure that we're effective, rather than just sort of spending money on consultants or doing a language access plan that's just going to kind of sit and not really make any traction, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. I do want to say we are joined by Councilwoman Cale Smith.
Thank you.
Councilwoman, do you have any questions for our appointees for a Commission on Human Relations?
Just briefly, I'm sure everybody's already asked all the questions that need asked, but one of the things I know that the Commission's charged with is education in the community, and one of the big issues that we have in our district is between the Black community and the immigrant community, and there's been cases where one has reported the other for things, and sometimes when it comes down to it, it's based on discrimination in many ways. So I want to know how you feel like you will be able to work with people to get information out about how we can peacefully coexist and work together. Can either one of you answer that?
Yeah, that's a big question, and
It is. It's getting bigger.
Yeah, and it's getting bigger, and I think there's language access, and then there's advocacy, and then there's sort of these situations that I think can be helped through language access, but I don't know enough about the problem to sort of make any broad statements about kind of how to fix it, just off the bat, right? But what I do know is that when people can communicate, they're more likely to communicate. When they have clear channels for communication, they're more likely to use them. And I think I would imagine that you have historically and currently marginalized populations that both kind of share space and share resources and don't have a means to communicate or to come together. And, you know,
So
I sort
I'll
of,
just say, you don't have
Yeah.
to, I know it's difficult to answer questions like when you're on the spot and on TV, like, you know, immediately that you didn't have a chance to really look into. So
Yeah.
I'll just say, I hope that that's something that you'll look into. I hope
Oh,
that's something
absolutely.
you'll all look into and encourage better outreach, more information, more education, in places where you especially know that there's a lot of controversy and a lot of issues. We've had some in many sections of my district, and you know, I think in a lot of times the black community feels that they've been left out, and yet we're doing a lot for the immigrant community, but the immigrant community feels like they came here and they're left out and there's nothing here. So it's just a matter of how, you know, everyone's own personal struggles. But I think when businesses open in the areas and people start reporting them for things and it almost becomes like a harassment. So I think at some point we've got to do better in education and educating people in the communities. So.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. And doing it in language is a big part of that.
Yeah, I actually had people come with me in my district to help me do some of it, but it's, you know, it's transitional. We have such a transitional community, so it's difficult. You know, who you helped last year, they're out and moved on to something new, you know, the following year. So I think it's something that has to be constant. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. If there are no further questions, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you so much for, you know, your willingness to serve. And, yeah,
Yeah.
I will vote on
Is
this.
that your kids in the audience?
Yeah, those are my daughters.
Oh, yours. Oh, I thought it was Barb's. Okay, thanks. I didn't see. Thank you. They should be on TV.
Okay, I think with that, we'll wrap it up.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay.
Good morning and welcome to the Standing Committee meeting for Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. Our first order of business is roll call. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Mr. Charland, Mr. Coghill, Ms. Gross. Here. Mr. Lavelle,
Here.
Mr. Mosley,
Here.
Mrs. Cal Smith,
Here.
Ms. Warwick.
Here.
Mr. Wilson,
Here.
Ms. Strasburger. 6 members present.
Thank you. Our next order of business is public comment. I would like to remind all speakers of the rules of council state that comments are limited to matters of concern, official action, or deliberation which are or may be before city council. Profanity will not be permitted. After you are called, please restate your name, provide your neighborhood for the record. Our first speaker is Ikahana Halmalkina.
Greetings and good day. My title is Ikahana Howell Makina. I am the Grand Chief of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aboriginal American People. We have moved into an era of accountability, equity, redress, and lawful adherence to the oath you all took to support, defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of Pennsylvania. We, the people of America, stand united and committed to eliminate discrimination, gentrification, and the marginalization, assimilation, and inequities that keep us, Aboriginal Americans, excluded from development, housing, education, and economic development as well, to include jobs, as if our lives don't matter. This is our plea to the members of City Council for equitable opportunity, free from discrimination. We need a concerted effort and a commitment towards reconciliation and redress. We invite each of you to be trailblazers and honor the many treaties already on the books by adopting the legislation being introduced on behalf of the members of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aboriginal American People. Thank you for hearing my voice today. Thank you for uplifting the work that my ancestors have put in, and we will be trailblazers alongside City Council to bring this into fruition. Thank you and have a wonderful day. In La peace, life, and love.
Thank you very much. That exhausts our list of registered speakers. If there's anyone in chambers wishing to speak, please come forward at this time. Provide your name, neighborhood. You will also be given 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. Special Agent Sunshine here again. I'm here today to let you know there's someone out there who thought they killed me and spread a malicious lie that I was dead. They stole my birth records and changed my name to Cerise Taylor to steal my inheritance. I know this sounds like a repetitive story, but right now I'm in a false marriage to someone with my real name, and they're getting monthly payments for my death. So I'm determined, and I'm not going to stop until we find out who it is. The two people I have on my list of people who may be doing this is my fake brother, Mark Taylor, and Samuel Gray Collier, the father of my daughter, who's 33 years old, Cherie Taylor. Sam, if you're lying telling people that we're still in a relationship, we're not. Our relationship ended 25 years ago when you stole 2 checks from my father, George Wallace. I shared an apartment with him and went to get the pregnancy test, left you there, and one of the checks bounced, and the other one was endorsed by your mother, Loretta Jackson. Cherie was born 12/22/90. She was your 8th child, you told me, and I just want to know, how many more children do you have, and how are you supporting them now? Are you still out here stealing, you and your mother? Mark, are you still robbing people? I just want to know the truth. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers? Any further speakers? Seeing none, that takes us to our standing committee agenda. Our first committee.
Councilman,
I did not. Sorry.
we have to waive the rules.
Yep. First, may we have a motion to waive the rules of council so that we can be. It is 10:46 by my clock.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Rules have been waived. We may begin the meeting. Our first committee of the day is Finance and Law, which is chaired by Councilman Strasburger. Our first bill is Bill 27.
Bill 27, Resolution Amending Resolution 858 of 2023, entitled Resolution Making Appropriations to Pay the Expenses of Conducting the Public Business of the City of Pittsburgh and for meeting the debt charges thereof for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2024, so as to reopen the 2024 operating budget to accommodate changes in the Department of Public Safety Bureau of Fire, the Department of Finance, and the Department of Human Resources and Civil Service in direct response to the ratified collective bargaining agreement with the International Association of Firefighters Local 1.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Bill 89.
Bill 89, Resolution Amending Resolution 909 of 2023, entitled Resolution Authorizing a Fee Schedule for 2024 pursuant to Chapter 170 of the City Code to reduce the cost of employee parking.
Motion to hold 1 week?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Bill be held 1 week. Takes us to new papers, first being Bill 163.
Bill 163, Resolution Authorizing the Mayor to enter into a professional services agreement with Carlow University in an amount not to exceed $113,400 to support the creation of a wellness index for Black women.
Motion to approve. Discussion.
Second. Discussion, Councilman Wilson?
Is there anyone here that can speak to it?
We can, I believe, this is Deputy Chief of Staff Felicity Williams is working on this.
Okay.
So we can, if you want to leave it open on the table,
Yeah,
we
we'll
can
leave
ask
it
the
open,
clerk's
yeah.
office to see if she can.
If that's
come
okay
up
with members, leave it open.
Okay. If the clerk's office is listening, if you would make a call to the mayor's office, ask Deputy Chief of Staff Felicity Williams to come to the table. That takes us to Bill 164.
Bill 164, Resolution Authorizing the Issuance of a Warrant in favor of Fisher & Phillips, LLP, for legal services in connection with the collective bargaining matter for an amount not to exceed $162,660.50 over 1 year.
Need a motion?
So moved.
I'm trying to understand what it's for.
This is for services already rendered. The city law department is working on collective bargaining agreements, and this is for services they've already rendered. This law firm has already assisted them with.
Well, that's not usually
Jesse
the way it
can
works.
certainly come speak to it
Okay, can I
more.
have somebody come to the table, please? Thank you.
Oh, I need a second for this bill.
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, Jesse Exlis, Deputy Solicitor Law Department.
Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Well, how are you?
Could you tell us why this is coming after the fact and not before? Why there wasn't a pre-approval?
So it actually was pre-approved, but through the ongoing ongoing negotiations, we actually exceeded the amount that we initially estimated. So this is to cover the portions that were exceeded the contract amount that we had already approved.
Yeah, that's not the way it works. You still have to come for approval. I just don't.
So
I don't feel
yes,
comfortable with this kind of stuff. I say it every time. There's a long time where people know what they're going to do and what they're going to need. Just bring it to us. We're happy to, if the RFP process went through, as long as you're doing it legally, we're good. What I don't like is after the fact when we have things that we have no choice or no say. Maybe we didn't want to pay another outside law firm. And I don't even know, where is this law firm located?
they're here in Pittsburgh. So
They're here in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean the issues we had already approved it, and it was like the issue was more like the negotiations went longer than we expected. So it wasn't anything that we could have anticipated to say like, hey, we're gonna take on these additional costs. So it wouldn't have been we couldn't have responded in kind of the time.
So at some point you didn't know they were going beyond the hours that you thought that they were going to be?
No, because it was continued negotiations with the respective collective bargaining. So
Who was this contract with?
this was with Fisher Phillips.
I mean, for what contract? What unit?
Oh, so
bargaining
for
unit?
the PJCBC, the firefighters, and the FOP.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say I don't feel comfortable with these kinds of things. I feel like there is some anticipation. You know when things are going a little bit longer than they should. But I am thankful that it's a Pittsburgh firm, at least, that we're giving money to.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilman Mosley?
Yeah, how much over the anticipated amount did?
So as far as I understand, we're done with the negotiations now. So this was what's captured in the resolution was that overage.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot over.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Affirmative recommendation. Thank you. If we can now go back to Bill 163, and I'll ask Ms. Williams. And for the record, if you could give us your name and title, and then give us a brief overview.
Absolutely. Good morning. My name is Felicity Williams. I am Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Gainey. The legislation that you have before you guys today is following authorization you gave us to receive grant funds last year. And so now we are looking for authorization to enter into contract with the party, Carlow University, to complete the work.
Okay. What's the name of the grant funds?
It's from the Benedum Foundation. They don't have a specific grant line item name of the grant fund, but it's from the Benedum Foundation.
And when we approved this, was the grant amount higher than 113?
No, it's the same amount that was approved.
Same amount. So this is that. It's not more coming from.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
It's the same. It's the same. It's just the next step in the process. So you authorize us to accept the funds. We now need authorization to enter into contract with
Okay.
the vendor.
And can you just explain what the wellness index for Black women will do?
Yes. So we have a couple key purpose and outcomes for this. So we're looking to develop a wellness index to measure the quality of life for Black women residing in the city of Pittsburgh that will allow for the effective and efficient allocation of resources to improve their social and economic welfare. We have a couple intended outcomes here. So first and foremost is defining wellness with Black women at the table to define that for themselves. What does that mean? Creating then that Black Women's Wellness Instrument. It's a tool that helps us measure current status, and then of course, as we implement strategies, the either success or lack thereof in the implementation of those strategies to improve those quality of life and economic welfare outcomes. And again, part of this process is also identifying some of those target strategies. The real need or reason behind this is an evolution of many reports that we have in the city of Pittsburgh that have identified this as being one of the worst places to live in the country if you are a Black woman, has identified some really terrible disparities for Black women in the city of Pittsburgh. And that's not something that we would want to see continue. The mayor has centered equity as one of his key principles. And so again, these reports and information tell us that the most marginalized group, the furthest from equity, are Black women. And so by centering them and developing this tool and measuring their progress, we'll be able to measure the progress of everybody upstream so that we can really improve the quality of life for all of our residents in the city of Pittsburgh.
So it's going to take like how many, like 100 people or?
To develop this?
Yeah.
So it would be a process with a series of small groups and then public and large convenings. So it'll be a combination. So we would look to, of course, maximize participation in the public convening process of this, but it's a multi-step process. Work is to be completed by April of next year.
And then at that point, would there be like a debrief on this, on what was found or what the next steps would be?
Absolutely, and we should have a live tool that we can actually measure. It would be a living tool. So it would not be static, one-time look. It's something that we could continue to use. It would live publicly on a city webpage where we'd be able to, anybody could go in and look at it and be able to adjust over time to show, hey, here's where we are right now. Here's the progress we have made. Here's where we might not be making progress. We hope we're making progress, but if we aren't, we can learn from that to say, okay, what do we need to change about what we're doing in the city of Pittsburgh?
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
I just wonder, was there an RFP
Yes.
process, that's all?
I'm sorry?
Was there an RFP process?
There was not. The reason being that the Bennington Foundation identified in our grant award Carlow University as the partner that we had to work with in completion of this work.
So I didn't feel, that didn't cut mustard when it was the Homewood Sports contract either. So that's some of the things, I'm gonna abstain today. So I make sure our law department's okay with it.
Sure,
too.
absolutely. And there is a WCP that was authorized and signed by both the solicitor, myself, and our procurement team.
Can we at least see a copy of the?
It should have been submitted with the legislation. Give me 1 second. I do have a copy of it here with me. This is what you all should have received with the legislation in your packet.
Madam Clerk, did you receive that?
I'm checking now.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion?
No, that's it.
I just had a
Councilman Mosley?
Sure.
question. Have tools like this, been implemented, in other cities, and kind of what was kind of the genesis of, identifying, this specific, tool to be used to address, obviously the very glaring disparities we know that exist in the city of Pittsburgh.
Absolutely. So another value of the administration is to be data-informed, data-driven. And so we don't want to be shooting in the dark. We want to be able to measure our work and use that data to inform us. And so we started to think through what is a way that we could capture data. There are some existing metrics that we can use to measure quality of life or wellness, but a lot of those metrics have not been identified by the specific group we're looking to target as their measures of success. And so that's why we wanted to take a step back, very similar to the BMI index. You guys might be familiar with that. There's a lot of critique of the BMI because it does not take into consideration, it's really made for men. It doesn't take into consideration women's bodies, and so it's not a very good tool to actually help measure body mass index. Very similar, that's an analogy that was made to why we need to develop a tool like this that centers what is defined as success for the specific group that we are targeting, and that they are not just information extracted from them, but they are actually participants in the process, and that they are compensated for being participants in that process as well. We did have some conversations with some national organizations where this had happened in other places in the country, and their advice to us was around the partnership between city government, university partners, and community is where this has been done most successfully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Second round, Councilman Smith.
Just to clarify, I mentioned that it didn't cut for the Homewood's Community Sports Grant, but it was because we were heard that it was in there, but it wasn't actually in there. So there's a difference there. And then the other thing is
Turn your mic on, Councilman.
darn it. That was my most humble moment here, okay? And my mic was off for it. I just said I apologize. The Homewood Community Sports Grant said that we were told that it was in the contract with the Heinz Endowments, but it had not been. This actually is different, so I want to make sure that's clear. And Madam Clerk did mention that we did receive it with the legislation, so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilwoman Woodward?
So just in terms of participants, how are you going to make sure that communities are equally represented across the group? You said 100 people?
No, I don't want to put a set number to it, actually.
Okay.
So there's going to be, it's multi-layered approach and strategies. There will be a smaller group where you do some more focused conversations, but then there will also be some public conversations as well. We will be working closely with Carlow University to help design some of those sessions and ensure that we're working also with our neighborhood services team to recruit diverse representations, because you make an excellent point. We don't want to have a monolith of just one type of individual. We want to have a diverse representation of Black women to participate in this process as well.
And I was also thinking just particularly like by neighborhood, geographic,
Carlow has already considered the geographic nature that we need to take into consideration.
And income.
Okay.
Income.
And
Income for sure, absolutely,
Thank
yes.
okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. That takes us to Bill 165.
Thank you.
Thank
Bill
Thank you.
165, resolution authorizing the issuance of a warrant in favor of Thomas and Hafer LLP for expert legal services in connection with the litigation matter in the United States District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania for an amount not to exceed $2,565.63 over 1 year.
Motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Bill 166.
But can I just ask real quickly, our law department, our solicitor signs off on this in our budget office, they're good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. As long as I'm assuming when things come to the table, they're still good, okay? That's it, thank you.
This was an excessive use case where
Okay.
the city's conflicted and gets representing ourselves and the officer.
Okay, thank you.
Bill 166.
Bill 166, resolution authorizing the issuance of a warrant in favor of Network Deposition Services for certified copies of transcripts for an amount not to exceed $11,986.74 over 1 year.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Bill 167.
Bill 167, resolution authorizing the issuance of a warrant in favor of Jacqueline Lane in full and final settlement of a claim for damage to her property as a result of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police SWAT incident on August 23rd, 2023, in an amount not to exceed $6,978 over 1 year.
Motion to approve?
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Bill 168.
Bill 168, resolution amending Resolution 861 of 2023, effective December 27th, 2023, which authorized appropriations in salaries of the Stop the Violence Fund for the 2024 fiscal year, beginning January 1, 2024, to add positions that report to the Department of Parks and Recreation as authorized by Ordinance 35 of 2023, effective December 16, 2023. The proposed expenditures of the Stop the Violence Fund for the 2024 fiscal year are hereby appropriated in the sum of $9,852,848.
Motion to approve discussion.
Second.
Second, discussion, Councilman Wilson?
Yes, we have the funds are being report to Department of Public Parks and Rec. So.
Thank you, Councilman. Hi, everyone. Catherine Vargas, Director of Parks and Recreation. At the end of last year, the council decided to allow us to also access Stop the Violence funding. And as a part of that, our first step is to, come up with a plan to how we would use that fund. This is an opportunity for us to really be serious about how we support youth athletic teams in Pittsburgh and youth athletics in Pittsburgh. Right now, through our city sports program, we have one staff person who has done a great job with the areas that we've been able to support, but we haven't been able to be as present in the sort of youth serving space as much as we could be, particularly in sports that we know young people are accessing, that we can have a bigger footprint and be able to support those youth athletic teams, have the city really play an active role in being part of that preventative nature of youth sports as it relates to stopping violence. So our proposal is to build that team. And there's a history there too with city sports. It has a history of having been a more robust offering of the Parks and Rec Department. We're excited about the opportunity to be able to build that back up so that we are playing a far more active role in the community of youth serving organizations that are playing any number of sports that support the preventative spaces where young people are, where their mentors are, where families are. And so that is what we are hoping to do with the added positions. We, of course, have worked with the office, the budget office on making sure that we are within the ratio that is required by Stop the Violence regarding internal versus external support. And we also have a proposal to, do more. As you'll note that this isn't the full amount that we would be eligible for, and that's on purpose because we want to be thoughtful about how we think about scaling our work so that we are a bigger part of the preventative work that we can do as a department to make sure that we are supporting youth, families, and the community of mentors that support those youth and families already, through our work with city sports. So that is sort of the spirit of what we're trying to do as a department to activate this fund, but also to be intentional about how we are thinking we can play a larger role in preventing youth violence through extra support to young people. And it also takes into consideration some of the things that the council has talked about around programs that extend into the evening, around creating programs that also touch on other skill sets like our Rec to Tech program, touching on workforce competencies and development, and really being intentional about making sure that we're a part of that community, a more active part of that community than we have been.
All right, thanks. So could you, so I'm familiar with, what we're talking about here, and I just want the public to get an understanding of what's happening here. What would they see first?
So first we would, what I would hope people would see is that we are going to be able to, with additional capacity, we want to do a couple of things. We want to play a more active role as it relates to youth football. And we've already started having conversations with community members about that. We want to have a more active role as it relates to supporting youth athletic associations. And we've also already started to have those conversations about what that could look like and what kind of support would actually be transformative to them. We want to have a more active role in supporting girls in sports. So as we think about our heavy investments in things like youth football, flag football, alternatives, to tackle looking at late night basketball programs, things that make sure that our young people have places to go, like activating our rec centers later in the evening, and even looking at that for older youth. We also want to stay and be intentional about what we're offering for females that are interested in sport. So part of this is also to have a more intentional outreach and a concerted effort to have someone who's dedicated to what is City Sports providing to young females that want to be part of this, and playing a more active role and partner with Pittsburgh Public Schools around Title IX, compliance, and making sure that the city is playing a role there. So that's the first thing that we're trying to do is, really take what we do now in city sports, which I think is great. We support baseball robustly. We support a really active indoor soccer league. We support basketball for elementary, middle school. We want to be able to build our capacity to really show up in places that we haven't been able to show up in yet. So those are kind of the first things that we're hoping to tackle with this opportunity.
Great. And there's 9.8 here. Can you help me understand what that will all cover?
I'm sorry, which part?
I don't know if this is just the sum of what we're reducing from.
Yes,
Okay.
that's the sum of that's the entirety of the fund.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah,
how
that's
much.
the entirety of the fund. So what is?
The amount that I'm asking for the positions is
It's on the bill.
298,329.
So say it again.
Sorry, $298,329. So it's a fraction. It's a small fraction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I wish I was representing the bill.
Yeah, I apologize
in the
for
title,
that. I did not
in the
realize
title.
that
So
it was not in there.
what do we get for 200 and?
So this would allow us to have a supervisor over violence prevention programs for city sports. So like I said, specifically focused on that. We want to have someone who is coordinating Title IX programs, which essentially means coordinating opportunities for young ladies. Someone who is coordinating a late night basketball program and opportunity. And then someone who is focused on youth football. And by that I mean like the universe of flag tackle, like working with those teams. But it's not taking away what we already do, which we have a coordinator who works on our youth baseball and softball program, which is over 500 games a year. We have our indoor soccer program, our basketball programs for elementary and middle school students currently, a volleyball program. So all of that we are going to continue. So that's already happening.
Okay, great.
So it would add those components to that work.
All right, thanks. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Councilwoman Smith, followed by Councilman Gross, followed by Councilman Warwick, and Councilman Charlotte.
Oh, jeez. I'm sorry.
Thank
that
you.
that's
I
so small.
just,
can also send a not tiny version.
Councilwoman Gross is showing that the numbers are so small we can't see them.
Oh, yes. And I apologize. You must have gotten this from the budget office. So the piece that I was discussing are the positions specifically. There is a proposal for the other cost, and I didn't mention those ones, but I can talk to that. So that would be like the operational supplies that would be part of being able to do that work. A line item specific to supporting girl sports. I mean, similar to how we have for baseball, we don't just have a person, they need things to be able to do the thing. So this is inclusive of that. So the total positions plus supplies is around $750,000.
I don't have the floor. I was trying to give side information to
Councilwoman
Councilwoman Smith. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Smith can't see. So,
No, I apologize that that's tiny, and I was here to talk about the position, so I apologize.
I actually talked with you, and I felt good about the conversation we had about what you're doing. But I'm hearing you say some things a little bit different than when we talked initially. You're doing more to increase like the help and support for the city, sort of like Big League was, but it's going to be bigger than Big League. It's going to be all sports.
Yep.
Are you increasing like the help with like pickleball and things like that? Because I'm hearing so much about pickleball.
Yeah, so we do. We've been doing a lot around pickleball.
Yeah, we don't
and I
have
can
one in
share.
District 2 yet, so we need one there. So go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea of how we've been supporting
Although that
pickleball
director
play,
lives in District 2, but okay. So
we activated the Shenley ice rink in the summertime this last year for pickleball play as an opportunity to increase pickleball when we weren't able to build more pickleball courts quite yet. And then we also are starting to do the work with pickleball leagues on permitting under our tennis program. So we absolutely have been paying more attention to pickleball.
Can I just say, I just feel so much more comfortable with this because this is what the public dollars are for. And so for me, I feel more comfortable that we're doing something that is providing a service to the public with public dollars, and that's what I feel most comfortable. It's something we can watch, we can see, but overall, I think that there's a lot of software. If we really want to track what's happening with grant money, there's a lot, and I'm sure we have some internally we just don't know about, but there's ways to do it. So I would probably feel more comfortable in general if we did that with all the grant funding. But with this particular funding, I'm grateful to Councilman Lavelle for putting it forward and for Council for voting for it, but I'm also thankful that you're doing the work that the dollars were intended to do.
And I'd also, should this be approved before we it's going to take time to hire positions. I would welcome meeting with any council district to talk about the youth sports kind of landscape in your district and making sure that we're being as supportive as we can of that work.
And I do want to say that I think when I told you I used to run an athletic association for about 20 years, and we did things, and I wish that we would get to this place here in the city of Pittsburgh in general, that I did like EMS showed how to handle sports emergencies. We did of course the clinics and all those sorts of things, but we showed how to handle a sports emergency. We made sure people had clearances. We also made sure that there was no one-on-one with kids, because nobody should be one-on-one. Even if you have clearances, you shouldn't be one-on-one with kids. And then the other thing that we did was the psychology of the game. We worked with a professor from the University of Pittsburgh, and they taught how to talk to kids to inspire them and to encourage them instead of, you hear people putting kids down all the time on the fields. So those kinds of things. I hope we get to that place, and you and I talked about that a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll say that we do some of that with our baseball program currently. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that we want to be doing, covering, clearances, having trainings, helping to coordinate with coaches to have days where they're learning about mentorship and getting support that way as well. So that's absolutely a part of this.
I mean, sometimes and we opened it up for parents too, because sometimes there's some of the worst ones sitting on the bench, criticize. I remember one time my husband was coaching and some woman yelled, "That guy's an idiot," and I said, "He is, but he's my husband." Okay. So I'm just saying sometimes parents need it too. Sorry.
Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, just to clarify one more time, so this is appropriating the $752,857 to these positions and supplies to expand youth programming, which is fantastic. I think we have all been talking about how do we do that more for quite a few years now, right? So which sources of funds, where would it come from? Parks and Rec definitely needs more investment, and because our neighborhoods need more investment. And God knows the neighborhoods have been saying they need more investments for a long time. So this is a great, I think, matching of funding source and use. But the technicality of it, reminds me, I'm recalling December when we moved the additional $9.8, almost $9.9 million into the trust fund. I said, there's already $11 million in the trust fund. And so why are we we had said a few years ago how much we were going to be putting in the each next year, right? And so this trust fund is standing at about $20 million. And so this is an appropriation from the trust fund. But then there's also kind of a budget for Stop the Violence for the $9 million in front of us. So is this like a budget amendment? Is it appropriation? I'm just kind of confused about how we do allocate the
And
funds.
when you're done asking
from
questions, I'll be confused.
The Stop the Violence Trust Fund.
So, you want me to try to speak to it a
Yes,
little?
please.
So I think members will recall at the end of last year, we capped the amount that could actually go into the fund. We then said 50% of that fund could be used for these purposes. We for the grants that we give out for the Stop the Violence grants, we also then made an adjustment to say, per your statement, that we've all said we value the need of expanding the youth sports. So we said, is it up to $1 million?
Yes.
Can be utilized by departments of Park and Recreation to expand those services, which are also have a direct relation to Stop the Violence. So in order to appropriate those dollars, legislation has to come before this body to expend those dollars, which is what Director Vargas is doing. In the very near future, there will be additional bills, well, a bill coming before council to also appropriate the grants that we're going to be handing out across the city for organizations that are also in the Stop the Violence space. So we'll be seeing that.
So that was the amendment that you sponsored to redo the kind of
yes,
the structure of the trust fund that we also approved in December. But what we have in front of us, and I'm still saying, I think the trust fund has $20 million in it.
I don't recall the exact amount.
So when I looked it up in December, it had $11 million in hand, and then we still added that 9.8 that had been projected, even though it was capped at like no more than 10, was I think the councilman's amendment. And so, you know, by my math, that's probably around $20 million. And then the budget we have in page, and I'm looking at the papers that are literally attached to the bill from in Legistar. It has a Stop the Violence Trust Fund in the operating budget. So the operating budget currently is drawing down $2.2 million. I think, if I'm following my columns here. No, maybe I need the last column. 2024 budget is $3.9 million. And so we're appropriating additional, we're not amending the operating budget allocations from Stop the Violence. We're allowing the director to do a drawdown that's outside of the kind of publicly line items once, or not, or are we just amending this? Why is this? But we have a budget page in the operating budget from Stop the Violence that has positions, and so is because this is adding positions of these little teeny tiny ones are being added to this one, but so why isn't it coming forward as an amendment?
This is an amendment to the fund. We amended the fund at the end of last year.
No, you amended the structure of the fund. But this piece of paper is the operating budget line items that come out of the Stop the Violence Fund for positions.
Well, that's not her. Let's get somebody to the table.
No, I know. I'm trying to articulate the question.
Right. Once she does this, those line items can then be added to that. Though the positions she's asking to draw down on weren't created at that time.
Right.
For that.
So with this legislation, we're setting aside some funds that then we can add the positions to. I don't know, do we have someone from the OMB here? Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Sure.
I know this is details, but since it's confusing for council members to understand what is in the legislative packet, I'm assuming it's confusing for the public as well.
I wasn't confused until you asked questions.
I do read the fine print, so there's that.
Now I'm like, okay, wait, explain.
So we can just come back to the bill if there's, because obviously I'm super supportive of the uses and I'm really excited, but do we need to just maybe have something additional in the packet for Tuesday or something? I don't know what. Or maybe I'm just like not understanding what's in front of me.
Would you like our budget director to come to the table?
I feel like OMB wrote this, right? Yeah, and that's this week. We can have someone from OB. I appreciate it. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. But if you wouldn't mind holding the bill.
Council, well, we have others who wanted to speak on the bill. Councilwoman Warwick?
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly say thank you so much, Director Vargas, and I'm very enthusiastic about this. I would venture to say this is one of the best $750,000 we're going to spend going forward. So, just to say that, we've been giving grants to community groups because of the disinvestment in our communities over the years, and those groups have stepped in, but this is also now us stepping in, right? Us stepping in and doing the work that we should have been doing for a very long time. And, I am a very strong believer in, there's the city and then there's PPS, right? And from 8 to 3, PPS is responsible for our kids. And outside of that, we are responsible for our kids. So as a city, I would love for this to be a first step. I mean, I didn't even know that it was going to include like nighttime basketball and all these other things. So I would love to see this become a first step toward the city partnering with PPS to offer cost-free morning care for people who we just saw some information out of Knoxville, I think. Kids missing school because parents have to go to work before school starts and they can't, creating morning care in PPS buildings, through the city, having aftercare, because our aftercare programs are fantastic, right, in the rec centers where we have the rec centers. So just really being able to do this citywide, expanding our summer camps. I mean, this is the best investment we could make in our kids. So I hope that this is really just the first step. And also, just since we're on the topic, just to think, I saw that the summer camp sessions have been expanded to 4 weeks, which is huge. Right, that's a huge advantage. April 6th is the date, Saturday morning. I know I'll be in my chair.
You must be on the short list of, do your kids participate in the
They
camp?
do,
Yeah.
they do. So, everyone get your coffee and your chair to line up in the morning and sign up for that. Anyway, thank you so much, Director Vargas. I'm very excited about this. Excellent first step, so thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councilman Charlin.
Just very quickly, probably more of a comment than a question here. I just want to thank the previous council for figuring out how to do this with the Stop the Violence Trust Fund. Very supportive of this. I think a lot of us, if not all of us, can speak to the great things that youth sports have given us, and I'm happy that this is how we're deploying these funds, and I hope to see more of this in the future here. Really want to thank Council President Lavelle for his leadership on this, as well as I know this was kind of a combination effort between Councilwoman Warwick and Councilwoman Cale Smith to kind of come up with this idea. But this is awesome, and I'm glad that we're moving this way with Stop Violence, and I'm happy to see this. So happy to support.
Thank you. And Director Cornell, could you please come to the table?
Hey everyone, Patrick Cornell, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to Councilman Mosley, can you just give us the budgetary explanation of what we're doing?
Sure. So, because this is a special revenue fund, what we colloquially will call trust funds, it is not actually appropriated as part of the regular operating budget. We include the trust funds in the budget document as a primer so everyone knows what's going on, but the actual original resolution 861 of 2023 is its own separate piece that says, for the Stop the Violence Fund, this is what we are doing for the 2024 fiscal year. And section 2 in there explicitly says, pursuant to the requirements of code, the number of employees and the rate of compensation thereof is hereby fixed and established. So what this amendment is doing, it's interesting because we're not actually changing the bottom line, but we needed to go in and note that what we're doing is changing the rates of these positions. Because we do have provisions in code that say once a rate is set, we cannot pay over it. So what this is doing here is actually allowing Director Vargas to come in and add those positions.
We are amending the operating budget.
We are amending the authorizing resolution for this special revenue fund.
I'll come back to you, Councilman Mosley.
Put your mic
Mic on.
Thank you. I I want to thank Director Vargas, and I really feel like this is, really an opportunity, with growing the capacity of departments, specifically around youth athletics, to really strategically collaborate with the schools and the youth serving nonprofits. So my first question is how much thought have y'all given so far to how this new initiative can really kind of bring much more strategic cooperation between the schools, the youth serving nonprofits, as well as the Department of Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I'd love to speak on that. One of the key things about bringing additional team members on board, we've had a lot of discussion around, and I've already, actually right before I came here, I was meeting with some coaches virtually to kind of get their input. Hey, we're thinking about doing this. We want to make sure that it is going to be a benefit to you. We want the city to come in and actually do the things that you want. So one of the first steps has been starting conversations with youth athletic teams, particularly in the areas where we're going to be growing, and also recognizing that some of the models that we've had, and I'll speak about the baseball and softball groups that we work with for city sports. We do have an advisory board that ensures that all of the teams that have a very deep-rooted commitment to their community have a voice in anything that we're doing. I think that's really important when we talk about being strategic and collaborative, is that what we decide is going to be best for the community needs to be driven by what the community is saying is going to be best for it. And so what we've done with baseball is we have an advisory group of coaches that any of the coaches can join. They help ensure that what we are actually offering are things that are going to make the league play better for everyone. And one of the things we added this year as a result of that, first ever, is a preseason tournament. Because what we've started to find is that teams didn't have enough time to match up the skill sets, and making sure that teams were playing at levels that were going to be competitively matched. And so by doing this preseason tournament, which was definitely a call that came from the community, we are now implementing that this season. So in that same spirit, as we move into spaces like looking at late night basketball play, looking at youth football, which we know we have a really robust community that is supporting that, one of the first steps is going to be making sure that we are working with those groups to ensure that what we do is actually aligned with what the community feels like we need. And then speaking to Pittsburgh Public, a good example this last year, one of our center directors out at Warrington, her name's Ebony Randall, her daughter plays basketball with Pittsburgh Public. They were in a position where they weren't going to be able to operate the 5th grade basketball league, and we actually took that on. It was hey, that's actually something we have spaces, we have people, let's do that. And now moving forward, we've had a far more robust conversations with Pittsburgh Public about what it means to support rec play, specifically in situations where they might have either schools or communities that don't necessarily have access to that. And so that was an example of where we've done that. We would be looking to do similar things moving forward in these other athletic spaces.
And one of my follow-up questions is, what was some of the initial feedback you've received from the organizations that you've been talking to about what they would like to see the city contribute to this effort?
Yeah, one of the major pieces of feedback has to do with the extreme cost of youth sports on families. And right now, leagues do their best, or teams, organizations do their best to carry that water as much as possible. But it's still expensive, and some sports are more expensive than others, as you can imagine, depending on what you need. And we want to make sure that sports are accessible to everyone. So one of the main things, and actually one of the reasons why there's a supply, line item in there, and we do this with baseball too, is how do we support the teams to be able to support their families when it comes to the equipment necessary, and the cost that might be falling on families by being able to proactively support that. So that's one major one. Another one has to do with the cost of referees and umpires and folks that are actually keeping those games in line. With baseball right now, our partnership with the Pirates allows us to carry the cost for all the umpires for the 500 plus baseball games that teams would otherwise have to carry. In other sports, those costs are being carried by teams, and they're high. So is that a place where we can step up and say, system-wide, if everybody, if we're going to be supporting the system, here's a place where we could do that. So those are some of the things that have been coming up so far.
Yeah, and last thing, specifically, about baseball. Before running for office, I ran an AAU baseball program.
Oh, no way. Okay.
And we traveled a lot, throughout, Western Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I know how expensive, particularly travel baseball is. It's, one of the things that's really frustrated me, about, baseball has really become a country club sport, in this country. So I would love, to have opportunity to talk to you about the connecting, more young people, particularly, youth of color, back to the game of baseball, given our city's rich history, particularly in black baseball, going back to the Homestead Graves, and the Crawfords. But I would just like to hear specifically about some of the other specific things that you do around the game of baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. So our support of the city sports, baseball and softball leagues, this last year we organized league play for over 500 games. This is inclusive of city teams and also external to city teams. Our partnership with the Pirates, we have a really great partnership with the Pittsburgh Pirates that allows us to make sure that we can have any team in our region play, because the Pirates will cover the cost of the teams that aren't city. But we organize all those leagues. We pay for all of the umpires. We do some coaches work. We'll have a big coaches meeting at the beginning of the year to make sure that resources that both the city and the Pirates have are things that coaches know about. We work to get clearances together. We also work with our Department of Public Works around, making sure that city sports teams are recognized as part of that, getting the fields in order. I mentioned that we have advisory of the coaches coming together. And then I also want to say that, to your point about travel ball, because, rec ball, is one of the things we hear in baseball is that some teams start to lose kids early because parents are getting them involved in travel. And then what you start to see is this disparity between kids who are getting the travel experiences and kids that are, or teams that are left to not have those players want to play in their rec league. So that's a very real conversation right now in the baseball space. It's happening in other spaces too, but baseball particularly. That's one, that we hear from coaches, and there was a little, I'm going to send you all, by the way, a non-tiny version of that budget. But there was some money set aside specifically labeled as travel to start to see, what would that mean for us if we had rec teams that wanted to go and participate in something outside the city. So not necessarily taking, not acting as a travel league, but acting as travel experience, which is just as important to consider. And the last thing I want to do a shout out, it's not a team that is part of our league, but it's a group of people that I really am excited about what they're doing. But Pittsburgh Hardball has been looking at this issue for kids in our city and our region about making travel experiences accessible for young people whose parents might otherwise not be able to afford that, because it's very real. My sister played college basketball at Gannon. The only way she was able to do that was because she had a coach, her high school coach at the time at our high school, financed her to be able to go to AAU play, and got exposure, and then therefore got a college scholarship. None of that could have happened without that. So definitely recognize the important role that plays, and I think that what this is going to let us do is bring that energy to other sports as well. But I absolutely agree with you around the trickiness of travel ball. It is creating a disparity in what kids have access to in sport.
Absolutely not. I definitely, look forward to working with you and, bringing some of my expertise to the table. And I definitely shout out Nelson and Brian at Hardball. Yeah. Actually, my 14-year-old son is on their 14U team.
Oh, no way.
And we actually merged our programs, because with me doing this I could no longer coach. So
Oh,
our
that's cool.
program that was called the Eastburg Avengers is now part of Hardball Academy.
Oh, that's
But-
wonderful. I spent a lot of time in that batting cage facility, which is also another wonderful thing that the city has, thanks to them. So, great.
All right,
I look
thank
forward
you.
to it. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Director. I love the idea of putting resources into youth sports. I always say, my brothers and I, what kept us out of trouble was sports. Honestly, that's what we lived for. That's what we did. Wasn't as costly then as it is today, and I'm glad that you're addressing that as well. So you're talking about 4 jobs?
Yes.
4 jobs. What's
Well,
the
technically 5 because
5?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, 5.
5 jobs, and they're full-time jobs.
Yes, they will be full time.
And they, what's the salary?
They're different. But they come in at like our supervisor salaries are around 70. Our coordinator salaries are around 50.
Okay, so 5 jobs, and the remainder of that money, that's 280,000 or so for the jobs. The remainder of that money, you said that will go into equipment. We purchase equipment for people who might not be able to afford it.
Yeah, so that would be through like supplies, and
Yeah.
that would involve equipment. We do have a process for that,
Got
but
it.
yeah, it would allow us to do what we do currently with our other sports, to do it in these other areas. And then there's a small portion there for travel, the concept of like if we were able to organize and bring people. And do I have that portion? I do. Good. And I broke that down, so I'll also share this. I'm going to share this document with everyone. I didn't realize you all didn't have it in there.
Don't bother.
But by each area, so making sure that we have there for like girls sports that we're set up, for the youth football piece, for the late night basketball piece. It's similar to, even in our operating budget under city sports, it's all couched in operational supplies, but we do have budgets specific to each sport to make sure that we have enough to be able to like support those teams adequately. But it would go to all those things. We support with clearances, we support with the training piece that Councilperson Cale Smith was speaking to. That would be what that supply line item would be broken out into.
Good. And Director, do you envision, so these 5 positions, and you talk about evening basketball league, which is great. Do you imagine, so they will be there coordinating, or?
So no, so the idea would be that these would be the people who would actually coordinate all of that happening. I mean,
Secure
even
the
when I think about,
gyms,
yeah,
get the team.
but when I think about baseball, for example, our coordinator for baseball isn't at every baseball game. We do have, our rec system is highly involved in all of this as well. A game will happen at Arlington Rec, it'll happen at the Southside Market House, it'll happen, and our team is there to keep the lights on, to be open. So that is, there's built-in support just by being part of recreation that we figure those things out. It's not like that individual is
No, I
now
understand.
working every night.
That's what I wanted to be clear about. So if there's a evening basketball league at Brookline Community Center, nobody will be there in supervision from the city of Pittsburgh. We just they have their permit and they go in.
Oh
and they
no,
play.
we would have people there.
Oh,
for
so
this
we have it
case.
staffed then.
Yeah, we would definitely have it staffed.
Gotcha. So somebody would be there in that situation.
Likely
'cause
also
it's a
running
gym.
the clock. We're getting
Right.
all our team members.
Yeah, because
clocked,
they're inside a
ready.
facility,
That's
right?
the thing. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas a baseball game, you're on some park
Yeah.
somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and we would have a plan for that. We do currently. We do have games that extend, into the evening when we have tournament play. And we work with that specific rec center to make sure that we have staff that know how to run the clock. That we have, they're there to make sure that the referees are good. Yeah, we would definitely be
Okay.
part of that process.
Okay. No, I'm fully supportive. I love it.
But we need people to organize all that and keep it all together.
Understood. Okay. Thank you, Director. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Second round, Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The more I'm hearing from Director Vargas, the more excited I am. So the questions I have for Dr. Cornell, all acknowledgement last week, I was asking questions at a bill, and I thought it was like adding money and it was taking money away. So walk me through again. You said that the first sentence does say it's amending resolution of 861 of 2023. And we do always prefer, I think it's better for the public if the amounts that's being changed or moved or whatever is in the title of the bill, because otherwise we can't tell from reading the bill if it's increasing or decreasing or moving or what's happening. But I do have this page, which is from the operating budget, which is attached to this bill in Legistar. So if the public sees this, then I feel like these positions are being added to these positions.
That is correct, Councilwoman.
Okay.
Yes. So the way that the special revenue funds work, they are set up by ordinance separately from, by this body. The ones that come to mind in particular are the Stop the Violence Fund and the Parks Fund. Both of those in code have very clear requirements that City Council must authorize annual appropriations. So if you're looking in the operating budget, there is also a copy of that original 861 that is basically the guide of how and why we are setting up the appropriations for Stop the Violence. So to have the updated budget lines as the attachment in Legistar, that is for the public to be able to see, yes, we have added a new subsection for parks positions. There are new budget lines in there that Director McDevitt has seen. And that is what is changing. It is just moving in a different manner than the general fund. Now, it's inherently tied to the general fund because that's where the money in is coming. So there is always going to be that connection.
Because through Resolution 8621 of 2023, we've basically allowed these uses of funds
Correct.
to move during the budget year.
Correct. And in this case, it is the specific percentage. I believe we're at 9% of the police budget, or $10 million, whichever is lesser. So this year it's just under $10 million. And then we know that is fixed based on the police budget. That hasn't changed since you last saw the operating budget. I guess this morning you saw the operating budget. But that didn't change in police. So that number didn't change. Therefore, the bottom line for this fund didn't change. So you are correct that there is no change to the bottom line.
Right. So since you have it in front of you, am I hallucinating that it's about $20 million in hand in Stop the Violence? It was $11 million in hand.
There is a balance in the fund. Yes, that is correct. What we are doing is we have built-in mechanisms.
I hear this. I've got a sniper over here on my left. Kids mocking me and telling me I'm wrong about things.
No, that's true. That there have been, for the past 3-4 years that this fund has been in place, there have been instances where we were not spending everything that was coming up, but the provision in code also says that money rolls over to continue programming.
Right.
When we are doing annual appropriations, we are only looking at the monies that we expect for that given year. So there is an additional amount that is being spent on various other projects or is expected to, but the way the budget looks, it is that particular money in for a year is what, salaries in particular, that's what we're looking at.
Awesome. Where does the public see that? Where can they find that?
Which part? The actual
balance.
amounts in there? So with city code, I believe the change happened at the end of last year. Trust funds will now be worked into quarterly reporting for 2024.
So, and the public finds the quarterly reports where?
On OMB's website. There might be a link from the council budget website as well.
Awesome. Okay, that was a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Thank you for being here, Director.
Thank you, everyone.
That takes us to Bill 172.
Bill 172, Resolution amending Resolution Number 41 of 2024, entitled Providing for the Sale of Certain Property Acquired by the City of Pittsburgh at Tax Sales, Items A through K, 268 Lombard Street, 2431 Wiley Avenue, 746 Clarissa Street, 4918 Rosetta Street, 123 Overbeck Street, 149 Henderson Street, 1400 Tumbo Street, as to add items E, 0 Isoline Street, I, 510 Stratmore Avenue, J, 512 Stratmore Avenue, and K, 514 Stratmore Avenue.
Do we have a motion to approve? Councilwoman Smith is supportive.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you.
Affirmative recommendation.
I just wanted to move those
You're
streets
welcome.
back. Thank you.
Need a motion to approve the invoices?
So moved.
Second.
And we need a motion to waive the rules to approve an annual software prescription for DPW.
I have a question on that. Can we discuss that?
Sure.
Okay. I think the director's here.
discussion.
Motion to approve with discussion, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I actually have a question on two of the P cards here.
Okay. Well, we're not on the P cards yet. We're on the invoices.
Okay, apologize.
No problem.
We gotta waive the rules on the P cards.
No, just for the invoices.
So my question is on the Route Smart Technologies. I guess that is an invoice, not a.
Yes, that's the invoice.
Yep.
We have to waive the rules to approve that.
Yeah. So, Director Hornstein, could you come talk to us about that?
Oh, there it is.
Chris Hornstein, Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Director. So the Route Smart Technologies invoice there, what are we currently using that for? And I guess my question is also, when will our routes be fully online there?
Great question. So we use the Route Smart technology to build our environmental services routes digitally. Currently they're in form of paper, so we're in the process of making that transition. I will have to get you an answer on the expected timeline for completion of that.
So I believe that we've been doing this for a couple years now.
Approximately a year and a half.
Okay. Yeah, and it would be helpful to know if we're continuing to spend money on this, when we can expect this to be up and running.
Absolutely.
And this is not for plow routes?
That's correct. This
Okay.
is strictly for environmental services.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Councilman Gross?
Thank you. Thanks you to Councilman Charlin for noticing this. We're doing it by invoice, and are you integrating with the kind of Director Norman technology group that's kind of vetting and purchasing technology for each of the departments that I'm just learning about newly as the chair of as IMP?
Absolutely, yeah. We worked with the Department of Innovation and Performance on this. This is a software subscription, so they helped us go through the process of selection of this vendor.
Great, appreciate that. And the routing is for optimizing, I assume, and I know that we've talked about this before, so we don't have to talk about it at length, but we know that we have complaints because some of our environmental services trucks are too big for some of our streets and can't make turns and are damaging city property or individuals' properties and things like that. Are you incorporating specific types of trucks to specific types of streets?
Yeah, I mean, we have two different sizes of trucks. One is our standard garbage truck, which is very large, and there's another version that's much smaller. What we know about the routes right now is that they are not necessarily balanced for weight. There are some routes that generate more weight in terms of trash than other routes. And so we seek to balance those out against the truck type and against the available resources. So that all staff are more or less collecting an equitable amount of waste. With that capability, once we have our current routes digitized, then we can go through the optimization process and we can begin to study, whether or not we can make a transition to a more smaller trucks and project out what that would look like.
So again, I don't want to belabor this at the table, but I do want us to talk about this because I would say you have more than two kinds of haulers, because the CNG haulers are longer than the other haulers and their turning radius is not as tight.
This is correct, but I mean, they can carry, essentially the same
So you're
amount of
doing by weight, but
Yes.
so I'm positing is that it would be great if the software could also look at the width of your streets, right? Those CNG trucks cannot go down some of the alleys in my district, and they just literally barrel over people's private property and smash down their fences. So we've talked about this in various capacities. There are different kinds of scenarios in different kinds of districts. So maybe we can follow up and see if the software can also do that. Once we get the
Absolutely.
initial kind of sketching out of what's where, let's look at which vehicles are appropriate, not just because of how much trash they need to gather and how much weight they're carrying, but whether they're really appropriate for that street.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Charlie?
I have a question on another invoice. So the under Bureau of Animal Care and Control, there is the fees for spay and neuter services. I was hoping that Director Schmidt might be able to come up and talk to us about that, what we're paying for, and what the plan is to get our spay and neuter services back online. Thank you, Director. Good stuff. There's.
Good morning.
Good morning, Director. Thank you. Yeah, so my question I kind of said is, I noticed we're paying for spay and neuter services under invoices here, and I was hoping you could tell us where we are with our spay and neuter services. I know that plan has been canceled, and where we might be going forward here.
Yeah, so the invoice there is for services that were done between contract, which is kind of where we are right now. Services that are already committed, not invoiced prior to the contract, or not being done prior to the contract, but were approved before December 31st by the city. The appointments were made in January, that sort of thing. Actually, yesterday, I submitted legislation to OMB to be submitted for introduction on Monday for a short-term extension of spay and neuter services, specifically around feral cat program.
Great.
While we spend the next few months working through an RFP on the overarching programs for both feral cat and spay and neuter of pets. They'll likely be into two separate programs, so then we can make better decisions without impacting the feral cat program around how the pet program is handled in an effective manner. This also ensures some guidelines around reducing the opportunity for folks to abuse the program, as we've noticed happening.
Yeah, and so that was the problem is folks outside the city abusing our current contract.
Yeah, we've noted multiple instances. Even some have come out because of the pause. Agencies from outside the city saying we've used this program, it's a problem. Well, that you closed it, and we're like, well, it's not for you.
Right.
It's city tax dollars.
Yeah, and I'm really glad to hear that we're going to continue with feral cats and programming around that. It hasn't been a problem in my district recently, but I know that in years when it becomes a problem, it's a real issue. So I'm glad we're staying on top of that and not letting that fall by the wayside while we're figuring out some contract issues here. Thank you for your leadership on that.
Yep, thank you.
Councilwoman Warwick, then Councilman Coghill.
I just want to say, so District 5 has had the pleasure of having animal control at our recent slate of community meetings. I highly recommend that to all council members. Hugely popular, just took up most of the meeting. It was really just great. So thank you to animal control for that. But just for the public, that we talked a lot about the program, and so just to sort of clarify a little, the idea is that you have these groups that do trap and release with the feral cats, and then you have pet owners. And before, what it was just like every resident had 5.
Yeah, so
right,
before it was unrestricted. If a resident sent an application,
5.
But when we looked at the numbers, essentially.
Yeah, and there was sharing between
years.
And this and that, and so this will separate the two, so that the residents, whatever it ends up being or whatever it ends up being, that's what you get as a resident. And then if you're doing one of these programs in the neighborhood, which is a great service, there would be a separate
essentially there'll be a registration for the trap and release providers, and then another one for homeowners or residents in their pets.
That's
Thank
it
you.
for me.
Councilman Coghill?
Yes, thank you, Director. So talk to me about, the people who were using false addresses to have their pets spayed and neutered in the city of Pittsburgh, right? And did that mostly revolve around cats?
It's a little bit of everything. It wasn't just dog. Like essentially what happened when we looked at the number of dogs that we've done over the past 10 years, it would have been almost equivalent to every residence in the city owning 4 dogs over that 10-year period. So we know that's unlikely. We've seen multiple social media posts where people said, if you don't live in the city, just to get a friend or relative that does, to fill out the form and say it's their animal.
Right.
So we are now going to start implementing some guide rails to ensure that doesn't happen.
Right. So when they come in, they bring their pet to where?
So what happens is that currently they fill out a form. It gets sent to Animal Care and Control. They verify the address, that it's a city address. There's not really any further verification at this point. And then they approve it. They send it to either Humane Animal Rescue or Animal Friends, depending on who the person asked to have do the procedure. And then they kind of take it from there. They'll schedule an appointment, and then they bill us for those services.
Isn't it as simple as show your identification when you bring your pet in?
Well, that's part of what we're looking through. So they don't get involved with verification of identity or identity verification.
Right. We kind of give the stamp of approval. They get a piece of paper. They get to go to, where do they go again?
Either Humane Animal Rescue,
right.
HARP, or Animal Friends.
Okay, so we're giving them the okay on a piece of paper, and they don't have to verify their address.
They do show ID, but you can also, so as we know, the city proper, also, there's a lot of places outside the city proper that have a Pittsburgh mailing address.
Sure.
They don't have a GIS system at the animal control center.
Yeah, they don't take the responsibility to verify that you are a city resident. Right. It's not really.
They make sure the paperwork matches,
Yeah, right.
but again, there's not necessarily the extra verification steps. So that's what we're looking into.
Got it. Yeah.
Also for sustainability, to ensure the program can use the funds wisely, we're looking at the true needs of the program versus anybody and everybody just getting an unlimited number of animals.
Got it. So we're going to work out the glitches and continue the service.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, we absolutely have every intent of continuing the services. We just want to put some processes in place to ensure it's.
Got it. So there's a lull until we work out the kinks as to.
Right, but we are, like I said, there'll be legislation introduced next week with you all.
Right. I can't believe how big of a problem it was for me in Carrick, especially. You must be coming from your district. You're chasing them up the hill.
I remember your district.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was everywhere. So, so people were really concerned about it. So we're going to continue the service. We're going to figure out how people can verify that they are city residents, so we're not paying for people in Dormont and other places to come and get their pet spayed and neutered.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Just kidding.
What?
Just kidding.
That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, may we have a motion to waive the rules?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any further discussion on the invoices? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there something else?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Invoices are approved. Need a motion to approve the P cards.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? P cards are approved. That takes us to Public Safety and Wellness Committee, chaired by Councilman Coghill. We have one new paper, Bill 155.
Bill 155, Resolution amending Resolution 248 of 2023, which authorized the mayor and the director of the Department of Public Safety to enter into an agreement or agreements with the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership to provide an ambassador program to assist police with non-criminal matters in the Central Business District by increasing the approved amount by $600,000 for an amended total cost not to exceed $1,200,000 over 2 years.
Motion to approve discussion, please.
Discussion, Councilman Coghill?
Yes, if Director Schmidt would come back up, that'd be great. You have questions for him too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Does he have to introduce himself again? Okay, I don't think you did, actually. I was paying attention to that.
Lee Schmidt, Public Safety Director for the city.
Good enough, good enough. So I'll just say to this, I went around with the ambassadors, and that's the Downtown Partnership. Jeremy Waldrop oversees the ambassadors. This was in the height of Smithfield Street shelter, and it was just kind of messy, but so I wanted to see firsthand. I was very impressed. I was very impressed with the leadership on the ground. They were there to help people in any way that they could. So I think they've probably made a difference. Is that your opinion as well?
Yeah, they definitely have helped a lot between the engagement with folks, being an extra set of eyes, helping us coordinate services that, whether that's getting DPW to help with some cleanup, the downtown clean team, the police, Office of Community Health and Safety, also even helping with a shuttle to the Code Blue shelter in the Hill. They've been a very great expansion of services for us.
I agree, and their communication with the police, their communication with the county who comes and cleaned the alleys was second to none. So I found it very worthwhile. I'll be in full support. I'm glad to hear your opinion on it, that it's working, and just have those eyes out there on the street is very helpful. And they're not beyond giving people directions to places. They help on any which way. They're just
that's kind of what they do.
Yeah.
Just anything anybody needs, they're there to provide.
Right. They're not armed, of course.
No.
Right. And what is their pay?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
But we're asking for $600,000.
It is a union position, I think.
Yeah.
Benefits.
Got it. Okay. No, that's all for me. I just wanted to really, commend the program. I think it's working very well.
Thank you, Councilman Kell Smith and Councilman Charlin.
So I'm trying to understand the value in this. I really do. I really am. Because I have seen people downtown, and they did seem like they were doing some things. But downtown still looks a mess, and I know that there's some talk about putting some signage in and moving or decommissioning some encampments from our conversation with Ricky Moody. So I'm thankful for that. But it's still the same conversation we've been having for a couple years now. I mean, before this administration, the same thing. What are we doing with the homeless population downtown and everything else that's going on downtown? I think there's a lot of empty storefronts. There's a lot of things happening, and I know with the governor putting some additional funds in, I know the mayor's office is trying to start some initiatives. I'm just wondering if this is the best use of these dollars right now, because what is the total of this?
600,000. That's the city's contribution for the year.
Yeah.
The program has a lot of other funders from downtown businesses.
Yeah, and I appreciate the downtown businesses are really struggling, and I really feel like I want to do more to help them. But I'm thinking $600,000 could probably get a building up and running, or a couple buildings up and running, and to maybe actually help people that need help instead of allowing them to die on the streets of Pittsburgh. And we have that happening. And so, it's concerning to me. So I'm going to be honest, I have a hard time justifying this kind of funding. No, I don't care who's matching it and what's going on, when the real issues are not being addressed. It's like a Band-Aid to me over the real solutions and there's not just this one initiative. There's a lot of the police, the police station they had, the substation you had to put in, this initiative, and there's other initiatives. But when the real problem is, we need to address the homeless population downtown in a way that we are giving people a place to stay, a place to be safe, and a place to get all the services that they need. That's the real issue here. And I mean, I feel like doing these things that we're going to do a decommission encampment, we're going to do this. Buy a darn building and help people get the services they need in one place. I just don't understand it. I'm trying not to make a big deal about this, but it's really frustrating to me because it is a big deal and it's been going on for so many years. And I just can't, I'm having a hard time, voting for this. And we have council members bringing solutions all the time to the table, but we're also trying to do things that maybe these aren't the answers, But what is the answer to help get the homeless population off the street, into housing, into a safe environment, getting the resources they need? We just have somebody now up in Mount Washington, you know, the issue there, and, you know, we had to worry about a pastor of a church, you know, who was, you know, in the middle of something with the homeless population. And that person is now on the streets. And so what worries me is he has assaulted people before, and he's probably going to be on the streets, probably downtown, probably in Mount Washington, doing some of the same things that he's been doing to other people. And I mean, it's frustrating to me because I know that there are people getting assaulted in these encampments. There are people getting assaulted in businesses and on the streets. I mean, at some point, all these efforts for public safety, all these efforts for cleaning up downtown are all just Band-Aids until we do a real solution here. And that is all of us working together. Whether you want to give council credit for doing something or not, whether it's the mayor's office who does it, whether it's the county who does it, I don't care. Everybody come together for the betterment of the city of Pittsburgh and for the people that are most vulnerable amongst us that need real help. That's all I'm going to say. So I have a hard time justifying this. Thank you. I'm sorry. I know you're sitting here listening to me preach. You hear me all the time about it. I apologize, but because I do know you work extremely hard trying to find solutions, and I know everybody's working on this. I just feel like, come on, let's get a solution. This is ridiculous. Thank you.
Councilman Charlin.
Director, thank you. You know, I have an unbelievable respect for the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership and the work that they do, and I think this is a really kind of innovative solution. You know, we know block by block it exists in the South Side, and we, you know, we've worked well with them on the clean team there. My questions here, I have a couple. How long is this extension for?
This is just for another year of the program.
Another year, so a year there. Is the PDP matching funds here, or is this just exclusively paid for by us?
No, this is not just us. There are multiple other donors
Other
for
funders.
the program and funders. The program itself is multi-million.
Okay. Do you, you know, obviously I think all of us, and I know that I've said it, and Councilman Krause has said it, Councilman Warwick has said it, you know, we're all interested in kind of this, you know, an expansion of a program like this. But it is rather unique in other cities. We're probably the only city that has the city proper paying into PDP for a program like this. That being said, if it's working well, is there any appetite to look at maybe an expansion of this?
There is. I know last time we were here, we did talk about, you know, this is going to be a pilot downtown. I'm currently working with the PDP about getting costing and looking for what it might look like to have some ambassadors that can go around to other business districts throughout the city, maybe have folks that kind of roam based on when the areas are busier, to provide these similar services throughout the city of Pittsburgh. They didn't have those in time for this contract to get up, but
sure,
we have been in discussions with them, and we do plan to discuss that with each of the council members to see what type of areas you would be looking at. But we want to make sure we even have an understanding of what that would cost or what it would look like before we, you know, bring it up forward.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty, you know, these contracts are usually paid out of a bid or out of a foundation or something like that. It's rather unusual that we're paying for it ourselves. That said, I know in my district, you know, there would be a lot of interest in having this around something like this around school routes. Well, you know, when buses drop off, things like that, and then in addition, along Carson Street in the evenings, as an extra set of hands. Although we are really happy with the entertainment patrol there. I guess my question, and this might be a better question for Block by Block, but what is the bare minimum of ambassadors that makes this program safe? You wouldn't want to have just one person out. That doesn't make sense. Is the number like 4? You know, how do you kind of determine where is the safe ratio of having additional ambassadors?
Yeah, I think that's part of what they're looking at as they are coming up with a more comprehensive expansion, would be to see what that would take, what kind of staffing you're looking at. I know they said at least 2. You wouldn't want a single person walking by themselves necessarily. Downtown they have, I think they have like 5 or 6 on at a time at least, so they see each other a lot. They're not necessarily walking with each other, but they're very close by one another.
Are they engaging in like cleanup activities as well? If there's not, safety to monitor, are they?
Yeah, some of them do that
stuff?
as well. You do have the clean team,
right?
Which some of this has been not our funding necessarily, but some of the funding for the entire program. They've actually reduced some of the ambassadors to add more to the clean team based on needs. That's also who monitors the public restrooms that are currently open in downtown, so that it's all kind of part of a comprehensive program.
Good. Well, I'm excited to learn more of this as this expands. I think this is the kind of, as we talk a lot about the space kind of in between a private citizen and a police officer, how we can work to increase more eyes on the street, increase safety, and make people feel safe, because it's not just about incidents. It's about people feeling like there's other eyes, and the kind of the Jane Jacobs theory of how we build safety here. And I'm happy to support something like this, and I hope that this is something we can look at expanding or internalizing on our own here. And I'm glad that we're doing it, and thankful for folks like Jeremy and Aaron and the PDP that make this possible.
Thank you, Councilman Warwick.
Yeah, so I do want to say this team, the ambassadors, are really great. I actually had an interaction a number of months ago. My mother had wandered. She was not downtown, but there was some talk of it. She'd gotten on a bus, and so I went downtown, and the ambassadors were incredibly helpful. In fact, it was interesting because folks who were just kind of hanging out around downtown, I mean, the relationship was clear, right? They knew that the ambassadors were the ones I needed to talk to, and they came immediately, right? Like anyway, it was a very functional program, so thank you for that. I did, but it wasn't to that point, but I wanted to ask, so one thing, and this is maybe a little bit unfair because it's not exactly what this is for, but when we mentioned the clean team, this is something I've talked with DPW a number of times, as well as OCHS. In our encampments, one of the issues in the encampments is that, tents get abandoned, things get abandoned, and there's lots of litter and otherwise, right? It's unsightly for people walking through. It's not sanitary for the folks living in the encampments.
It's unsafe.
Yeah, and it, right, so I really would love to find a way for OCHS and DPW to work together like a co-response model on not necessarily decommissioning, that's not what I'm saying, but of getting in those encampments and cleaning up what is not belongings. It just seems like something that it seems like something we can do. Just sort of the least of things that we can do is go in, and I know that DPW has been great about when either volunteers or encampment residents themselves kind of bundle things up and put them, this is on the bike trails in particular, put them on the side of the road. DPW has been great about coming through and picking up, but getting that done in a methodical, organized way so that it's happening once a week. And I don't know if this team could, I don't know if that Eliza Furnace is considered downtown next to the jail. That might be out of the boundaries of downtown. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's not really, but
it's not really. But
we are actually do have a meeting. I think is next week scheduled with Operation or Block by Block, and a couple providers that the county uses for homeless outreach. Our Roots team and PDP around how to potentially use this as not only services to provide encampment cleaning or maintain encampments, helping clean up, but also a little bit of a pipeline for employment for folks that are in those, have been experienced homelessness, have moved on to at least transitional housing and are looking for careers or jobs, that they can provide additional staff to do that. They also would have a little better understanding and experience. We don't want to create additional work for DPW staff that's already kind of stretched, but also we want to have folks that understand the population that they're working with, so they can work with them to help them clean their spaces and ensure that if we're not able to get them, if they're not ready to go into housing yet, but they're willing to do some stuff. But that is something that we're looking at, again, with the county to help have them fund some of this. This can't only be on the city, so we've been working very closely with DHS and other county providers to come up with some solutions on how, if there is an encampment or encampment closes, how we clean that space up and help. If there is an encampment existing, how we keep it clean and provide some services to those folks at the same time.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, that definitely, and I am very sympathetic to our DPW employees who don't feel comfortable going into the camps unaccompanied, so to speak, by someone who is more versed in engaging with, whether that means sort of checking on a tent, is someone in there, whatever. So I'm glad to hear that, and I hope that that gets set up sooner rather than later, because I'm just sort of keeping the spaces clean. I don't mean to be harsh, but it really feels like the very least that we can do. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilwoman Smith?
I just want to ask real briefly, would you consider expanding the program to places like the Avenues of Hope or someplace like that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Thank you, Director. That takes us to Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Warwick. Councilwoman Warwick, do you want to read the first three bills together, or you want to take them? Okay. Can we read Bill 189, 190, and 191 together?
Sure. 189, Resolution amending Resolution 650 of 2023, which provided for an agreement or agreements with CSX Transportation for costs associated with the construction for the Charles Anderson Bridge project, providing for the payment of the cost thereof not to exceed $439,223, federally reimbursable at 100%. Bill 190, Resolution amending Resolution 652 of 2023, which provided for an agreement or agreements with Allegheny Valley Railroad Company for costs associated with the construction for the Charles Anderson Bridge project, providing for the payment of the cost thereof not to exceed $250,000, federally reimbursable at 100%. And Bill number 191, Resolution amending Resolution 743 of 2023, which provided for an agreement or agreements with SAI Consulting Engineers for costs associated with the construction management and construction inspection phases for the Charles Anderson Bridge project, providing for the payment of the cost thereof not to exceed $2,854,186.11, federally reimbursable at 100%.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I don't know if anyone has discussion. I don't have any, but
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation on all three bills. That takes us to Bill 138.
Bill 138, Resolution authorizing the mayor and the director of the Department of Public Works to enter into an agreement or agreements or the use of existing agreements between the City of Pittsburgh and Pashak Plus MTR for the professional design services for Fort Pitt Park Phase 1 improvements at a cost not to exceed $300,000.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Brief discussion. Yeah, so
Discussion.
this is the one we held with questions about where the park is and what the work is. You have Director come up.
Just kidding.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Okay, Fort Pitt Park is in the Garfield neighborhood. This project is design services, so this is follow-up of a master plan that we did with residents in that area for the park. The original budget allocation was in the 2023 capital budget, so we would requested those funds in 2022. We were working through some technical challenges, getting this under contract. The community wanted to be involved in that process. So ultimately we went with an at-large public bid design service contract, which is a little bit unusual, but we've done them before in the past. And so that is the resolution here before you today, is to perform those design services.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. That moves us to Land Use and Economic Development Committee, chaired by Councilman Wilson. We have one deferred paper, Bill 22.
Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind, we've had an officer waiting all day for the Innovation and Performance Assistant Chief.
I'm going
Would
out
that
of
be all
order.
right if we
I'm
go
okay
out of
with that.
order? Thank you, I apologize. Thank you, Commander Trapp, I didn't realize. Is Commander Trapp Chief?
So,
Assistant
Madam
Chief.
Clerk,
Assistant
if we could
Chief.
move to Innovation, Performance, Asset Management, and Technology Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Gross. We have one paper, Bill 156.
Bill 156, Resolution amending Resolution 630 of 2020, which authorized the city's Department of Public Safety to enter into relevant agreements to purchase document management software from Power DMS, Inc., to extend the agreement an additional year for an increase of $34,317.77.
Motion to approve?
Second.
I don't have any questions.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Thank you, Chief, for being here with us. That takes us back to Land Use Economic Development Committee, chaired by Councilman Wilson. Our first deferred paper is Bill 2230.
Bill 2230, Resolution providing for the designation as a historic structure under Title 11 of the Code of Ordinances, that certain structure known as B'nai Israel Synagogue, located at 327 North Negley Avenue in Garfield, in the 11th Ward, City of Pittsburgh. The owner of the property supports the nomination, and there is no cost to the city.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Bill 51.
Bill 51, Resolution providing for the designation as a historic site under Title 11 of the Code of Ordinances, a certain site known as Frick Park, located at 2005 Beechwood Boulevard in the Swiss Elm Park, Squirrel Hill South, Regent Square, Point Breeze neighborhoods in the 14th Ward, City of Pittsburgh. The owner of the property supports the nomination, and there is no cost to the city.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. That takes us to our new paper, Bill 169.
Bill 169, Resolution providing for the designation as a historic structure under Title 11 of the Code of Ordinances, that certain structure known as Sal's Barbershop, located at 712 Brookline Boulevard in Brookline in the 19th Ward, City of Pittsburgh. The owner of the property supports the nomination, and there is no cost to the city.
Motion to hold for cablecast public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bill be held for cablecast public hearing. The Texas Recreation, Youth, and Senior Services Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Smith, Bill 160.
Bill 160, Resolution authorizing the Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation and/or the Director of the Office of Management and Budget to enter into agreements in individual amounts of $10,000 or less with performers, instructors, artists, referees, and persons with specialized skills in connection with the department's recreational and instructional programs and special event services.
All that stuff. Motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Councilman Wilson?
Chair, I would like to register aye votes for the remaining bills.
So noted.
Thank you. Takes us to Bill 161.
Bill 161, Resolution authorizing the mayor and the Director of Parks and Recreation on behalf of the City of Pittsburgh to enter into financial and in-kind sponsorship agreements valued at $5,000 or less for the City Parks Office of Special Events 2024 season.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That takes us to Bill 162.
Bill 162, resolution authorizing the mayor and the director of Parks and Recreation to enter into sponsorship agreements for the City of Pittsburgh Independence Day Festival. The sponsorship terms will provide a total value of $10,000.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. That takes us to our last committee, Intergovernmental and Educational Affairs Committee, chaired by Councilman Mosley. On supplemental paper, Bill 184.
Bill 184, resolution amending resolution number 935 of 2021, effective December 30 of 2021, entitled Resolution Authorizing the Mayor and the Director of the Department of Finance on behalf of the City of Pittsburgh to enter into a cooperation agreement with the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh to document local cooperation and the Housing Authority's agreement to make payments in lieu of taxes for the Manchester Redevelopment Housing Development by authorizing future amendments to be made to the original cooperation agreement at no cost to the city.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. New papers, Bill 157.
Bill 157, resolution adopting plan revision to the City of Pittsburgh's official sewage facilities plan for 5255 Butler Street at no cost to the city.
Motion to approve.
Second. Sorry.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. Bill 158.
Bill 158, resolution adopting plan revision to the City of Pittsburgh's official sewage facilities plan for 220 North Shore Drive at no cost to the city.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. And lastly, Bill 159.
Bill 159, resolution adopting plan revision to the City of Pittsburgh's official sewage facilities plan for multiple properties on Center Avenue at no cost to the city.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Affirmative recommendation. That does exhaust our agenda. We do have a few meeting announcements. This afternoon at 2 o'clock, council will hold a briefing on bills 133, 140, and 141 to discuss home ARP, and with sessions at 2 and 3 o'clock. Next week on Monday, March 4th at 10 a.m., council will hold a Cablecast post-agenda here in Chambers to discuss DOMI's Complete Streets Action Group Biennial Plant Report. And also next week, council will hold our regular meeting on Tuesday, March 5th at 10 a.m. and a standing committee meeting on Wednesday, March 6th at 10 a.m. To register to speak at council meetings and hearings, please fill out the sign-up form on the council meeting webpage or call the clerk's office at 412-255-2138. Is there anything from members? Then a motion to approve the minutes and adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.